Just one taste, she coaxed. The rancher drank from the cup and saw her reflection in the mirror. The twin suns of Cinder Mesa were low in the sky, casting long orange shadows over the dusty plains. The horizon shimmered with heat, and the metallic silhouettes of the hover ranches gleamed like polished copper. Jed Calloway, a rancher in his late 40s, guided his small herd of bioengineered space cattle along the cracked, rust-colored ground. The cattle's sleek hides reflected the fading light, glinting faintly as if they held tiny stars within them. Jed wiped sweat from his brow with a dusty sleeve. The wind carried the scent of dry soil and ionized minerals, a smell he had come to know as the frontier. It was quiet here, too quiet, but that had always been the way on the outer planets. Out in the open, he had only himself, the herd, and the occasional outpost to break the silence. He spotted it just over the ridge, the Starling Outpost, a small settlement built into the rocky cliffs, its steel and glass panels catching the last rays of the twin suns. Smoke curled from a tiny engine stack, and the faint hum of machinery reminded him that someone, or something, was always awake here. The sight of civilization was comforting after weeks of lonely riding, even if the outpost's reputation was a little strange. Jed nudged his cattle forward. They clopped over the hard ground, hooves making dull thuds, and he felt a flicker of relief as the outpost grew closer. He had come here for supplies, water, nutrient packs for the herd, and maybe a little advice on how to handle the shifting grazing fields. Life out here was harsh, and even a seasoned rancher like him had to rely on places like this. The gates of the outpost swung open with a quiet hiss as Jed and his herd approached. He rode slowly, scanning the settlement. The buildings were a mix of old frontier woodwork and sleek metal panels, like someone had tried to mix a 19th century town with a space station. Small drones zipped overhead, delivering packages or scanning the surroundings, their tiny lights blinking in a silent rhythm. At the central hub, he saw her. She was standing behind a counter made of polished dark stone, and she looked like she belonged neither fully to this world nor any other. Her hair caught the last light, glowing like the embers of a dying fire, and her eyes had an unusual clarity, bright, almost too knowing. She was Selena, the woman everyone whispered about, but no one truly understood. The townsfolk called her a dream weaver, but Jed had never believed in such things. Until now. "Welcome to Starling," she said, her voice soft but steady, carrying just enough warmth to draw him in. "You must be Jed Calloway. I've heard you have quite the herd out on the plains." Jed raised an eyebrow. "And you've heard right. Name travels fast out here, I guess." He dismounted and led the cattle toward the holding pens. The animals moved obediently, sensing his calm presence, and Celine followed, her steps quiet but purposeful. "You've had a long journey," she said, glancing at the horizon where the suns were now dipping behind jagged cliffs. "I can offer you something to ease the ride." A drink. It's special." He had learned to be cautious. Out here, strangers were rare, and those who offered special drinks often had strange motives. But there was something in her tone, a gentle insistence, that made him pause. "What kind of drink?" he asked. Celine lifted a small glowing cup from the counter. The liquid inside shimmered like liquid starlight, rippling even though there was no wind. "Just one taste," she said. "It will help you see things clearly. Things about yourself, and maybe about the path you're on. I've been seeing things my whole life, woman. Mostly cattle wandering off and dust storms chasing me. Don't need a drink for that." Celine smiled, a quiet curve of her lips. "No, this is different. I can't force you. But you'll know when it's time to try it." He hesitated, staring at the liquid. It glowed softly, almost calling to him. There was no smell, no vapor, nothing unnatural except the soft hum he thought he heard when it moved. A part of him, an adventurous, foolish part, wanted to sip it. Just one taste wouldn't hurt. Could it? Jed finally nodded. "All right, one sip. For the sake of curiosity, and because the suns are going down and I need something to make the ride back easier." Her fingers brushed his briefly, and it was a strange sensation. Not cold, not warm, just significant, like a signal passing between them. Jed raised the cup and drank. The liquid was cool, smooth, and carried a faint sweetness. It was unlike anything he had ever tasted, almost like it held memories he hadn't lived, smells and sounds he hadn't known, emotions that were both foreign and familiar. He lowered the cup and felt a slight dizziness. Not unpleasant, but enough to make him steady himself on the counter. The mirror behind the counter reflected his image, or so he thought. The man staring back at him wasn't quite him. The face was softer, the eyes sharper, and for a moment he could swear it was Celine's reflection staring out of his body. His hand trembled slightly, and he looked around. The outpost was quiet. Celine's expression hadn't changed. What is this?" he asked, his voice low. "It's made from mirror crystals. They show more than appearances, they show echoes. Echoes of trust, of fear, of the choices you carry inside. You're saying I saw your face?" "Not mine. Not really. The reflection is a mirror of your thoughts, your instincts, the part of you that listens, that follows." He looked at her, trying to process the words. "Sounds confusing." "It is," she said, a faint smile on her lips, "and that's why you feel it. You feel something shifting inside because it is shifting. The cup doesn't lie, Jed. It only shows." He set the cup down carefully, staring into the mirror again. The shimmer of the reflection made him uneasy. For a moment he wondered if he should leave, ride back across the plains, pretend he hadn't seen anything. But curiosity rooted him in place. The suns were gone now, leaving a violet dusk over the cliffs, and he felt the first stirrings of a feeling he hadn't had in years. Wonder. "I don't understand it yet," he admitted, "but I feel it. Something's different. That's the first step. You'll see more in time. But for now, rest. Eat something. Drink water. Let the mirror speak when it wants to." Jed laughed softly, a dry sound that mixed with the settling hum of the outpost. He didn't know if he believed her fully. Yet for the first time in a long journey, he felt something stir inside him that wasn't worry, or exhaustion, or the endless responsibility of his herd. He felt anticipation. The night crept in slowly over Cinder Mesa. Stars twinkled faintly in the violet sky, and the twin moons cast silver shadows across the rocky ground. Jed guided his cattle into the pens, their soft movements making little echoes against the metal rails. He could still see the glow of the cup on the counter, faint as a whisper, and he knew sleep would not come easily. Not tonight. Because he had glimpsed something just beyond his understanding. And deep down he knew it was only the beginning. As he settled on a bench outside the outpost, his hat pulled low over his eyes, Jed glanced toward the mirror crystals behind the counter one last time. The reflection shimmered, fleeting, almost alive. And for a heartbeat, he thought he saw a shadow of himself. Or was it Selene? Smile back. The frontier was never quiet. Not really. Not with mysteries like these. And Jed Calloway, rancher of Cinder Mesa, felt that for the first time the desert might be hiding more than dust in storms. Starling outposts staring at the twin moons hanging low in the sky. Their silver light stretched across the rocky ground, painting shadows that danced like ghosts. The desert seemed alive with whispers he could almost hear, as if the land itself was urging him to think, to feel, to notice something he had never seen before. His mind kept returning to the cup, the one Selene had offered him. He remembered the shimmer of the liquid, the faint warmth as it slid down his throat, and most of all the reflection in the mirror. Selene's face had appeared in his own, just for a moment, and it had left him uneasy in a way he couldn't explain. Jed sat up, rubbing his tired eyes. He shook his head. It was just the light, he told himself. Nothing more than tricks of the mirror and the desert sun fading away. But deep down he knew it wasn't just that. Something had changed. Something inside him had shifted, and he could feel it even in the small, simple movements of the night, his fingers brushing the coarse fabric of his shirt, the quiet click of the pen as he checked the pen gates for his herd, even the distant hum of the hover drones circling the outpost. By the time dawn came, Jed was restless. He walked back into the outpost, where Selene was already awake, tending to her small garden of glowing plants that seemed to pulse faintly with life. Their soft light filled the room like a private sunrise. "Morning," Jed said, trying to sound casual. "Didn't sleep much." Selene looked up, her eyes bright and steady. "I thought you might not. The mirror crystals show more than you expect. Sometimes they leave thoughts lingering, questions, feelings. It is a lot for one night." Jed scratched his head. "Feels like I drank a whole canyon of thoughts instead of a cup of water." He tried to smile, but there was a tension in his chest that made it hard. Selene laughed softly, a sound like wind moving through dry grass. "Yes, that is a good way to describe it. And some of what you saw was not just a reflection. It was a glimpse of what you carry inside yourself, Jed Calloway." He frowned. "Inside me? What does that even mean?" She moved closer, careful but deliberate. "The cup, it shows echoes, not only of others but of yourself. The choices you have made, the paths you could have taken, the things you never said or did. It does not tell lies, it only reveals. Sometimes gently, sometimes with a shock. So, that reflection in the mirror, it wasn't really you? No, Selene said, shaking her head. Not exactly. It was part of you. The part that notices, that trusts, that fears. It chose my face because you saw someone guiding you, someone you could listen to. Or it could simply be the curiosity you have for things unknown. Jed leaned back against the counter, staring at the faint light spilling from her glowing plants. He felt a strange mixture of fascination and unease. So I didn't drink magic. I drank me? Exactly, she said. And the more you drink, the more you see. But be careful. The mirror is not always kind, and the echoes it shows are not always simple to understand. Jed rubbed his eyes. I think I already saw something I don't fully understand. Last night I saw flashes of another life. One where I did things differently, lived differently. And it felt real, like it could have been me. Selene nodded, as if she had expected him to say it. Yes, that is how it begins. You will see more. Sometimes it will show possibilities. Sometimes regrets. Sometimes choices you did not know you had. Jed was silent for a long moment. The desert outside was waking up, dust rising in the early winds. The twin suns began to climb, reflecting off the metallic panels of the outpost in sharp, blinding lines. He squinted, shielding his eyes. I don't know if I'm ready for that, he said finally. To see all the other lives I could have lived. Selene tilted her head, considering him. You do not need to be ready. You only need to look. The mirror does not force you. It simply reflects. Sometimes the most important thing is to see what you have missed. Jed's mind wandered. He thought of his herd, of the lonely plains, of the nights spent staring at distant stars, wishing for something he could never name. Could this cup, this mirror crystal, really show him what he had missed? Could it help him understand himself better? Selene, sensing his hesitation, reached behind the counter and placed another cup in front of him. This one glowed more brightly than the first. If you wish, you can drink again, she said. It will not hurt you. Only show. The warmth from the first sip still lingered in his chest. He lifted the cup to his lips, and the liquid flowed over his tongue like silk. This time, the taste was more intense, richer, deeper, carrying not just sweetness but hints of memories, of moments he did not know were his own. As he lowered the cup, the mirror behind Selene shimmered. At first it reflected only his own face, but then, slowly, it began to change. Jed blinked. He saw himself sitting at a campfire, years ago, but not quite himself. This version of him smiled more freely, spoke more openly, and reached out to others without hesitation. He saw a life where he had left the ranch for a short while to explore the stars, meeting people he had never met, experiencing things he had only dreamed of. He felt joy, regret, and longing all at once. Jed's breath caught. I don't know what I'm seeing. Selene's voice was calm. It is not meant to be understood at once. You are seeing what lies inside you. The mirror does not judge, it only shows. What you feel, that is the truth. Jed looked at her, and then at the mirror. He could see fragments now, quick flashes of other possibilities, each as real as the life he lived. He saw himself helping others, losing friends, finding love, choosing paths he had never walked. Each reflection lasted only a moment, yet it left an impression that lingered, heavy and bright at the same time. It's overwhelming, he admitted. I don't even know which one is real. Selene shook her head gently. They are all real, in a sense. Every choice you make exists in some form. The mirror shows what you could have been and what you can still become. Sometimes that is more important than the life you see in front of you. Jed closed his eyes, trying to absorb it. The quiet hum of the outpost, the faint glow of the plants, the distant calls of his cattle, all of it felt different now. He felt lighter and heavier at the same time, as if the cup had opened a door inside him he didn't know existed. Dickie? He opened his eyes and saw Selene smiling softly. You will not see everything at once, she said. Some reflections come slowly, some take years. But the first step is always noticing. You have noticed, Jed Calloway. That is enough for now. Jed nodded, setting the cup down carefully. The taste lingered on his tongue, and he could still feel the faint warmth running through his body. I think I understand a little, he said. It's like looking into myself and seeing the choices I've ignored. Exactly, Celine said. And one day you may choose differently because of what you have seen. But that choice is yours, not mine, not the cup's. Yours alone. Jed stood, stretching his stiff muscles from the night spent in thought. The suns were climbing higher, and the outpost was now alive with activity. Traders and travelers moved through the streets, their voices mixing with the hum of drones and the occasional clang of machinery. Yet Jed felt, apart from it all, in a quiet space where only his own reflections mattered. He walked outside to check on his herd. The animals moved slowly in the morning light, their soft breathing and gentle movements grounding him. He realized something then. The reflections, the echoes, the alternate lives, they were not meant to distract him from this moment. They were meant to guide him, to remind him of what he valued, of what he could become. Jed looked back at the outpost one last time before leading the herd to the grazing fields. Celine stood at the doorway, watching him with the same calm, knowing expression. He didn't wave, but he felt a connection, subtle yet profound. She had given him something no one else could, a glimpse of himself beyond the life he had accepted, and the possibility that he could grow beyond it. The plains stretched out before him, endless and bright under the twin suns. Jed adjusted his hat, guiding the herd forward. The desert was quiet, yet the silence was no longer empty. It was full of promise, full of reflections waiting to be discovered. And Jed Calloway, rancher of Cinder Mesa, felt for the first time that life was more than survival. It was discovery, choice, and understanding, the kind of understanding that came only when one dared to see oneself clearly. Word count, approximately 1250. The suns were high over Cinder Mesa, casting long, sharp shadows over the plains and the outpost. Jed Calloway rode slowly through the grazing fields, his herd moving behind him like a wave of polished bronze. The taste of the mirror crystal cup still lingered in his mind, even after a day had passed. It was not a flavor he could forget, more like a memory pressing itself into his bones, making him aware of parts of himself he had never seen. Jed shook his head, trying to focus on the present. The plains demanded attention. The cattle had to graze where the soil was soft, and the water reserves were low. But the images from the mirror haunted him, moving through his mind in fragments. Faces he had never seen, voices he had never heard, and choices he had never made appeared in his thoughts like echoes in a canyon. He stopped his horse near a small outcrop of rocks and stared into the distance. Something shimmered on the horizon. Not heat, not dust, but a subtle ripple in the air, almost like a mirage. He frowned. The desert was unpredictable, but this felt different. Back at the Starling outpost, Celine was tending her garden, her hands brushing lightly over the glowing plants. She looked up and saw Jed pausing near the rocks. Her expression was calm, knowing. She understood the pull the mirror crystals had over him. Some people could walk away after a sip, others could not. By midday, Jed had returned to the outpost. He dismounted slowly, his thoughts heavy with the fragments of lives he had glimpsed. He had expected the reflections to fade with time, but they had not. Instead, they had grown more persistent, appearing not only in mirrors but in windows, shiny metal panels, even the surface of his water flask. The echoes were everywhere, subtle yet insistent. Celine noticed him immediately. "You've seen more?" she said softly, as if it were a fact beyond question. Jed nodded. "I can't. I see flashes of things I might have done, could have done, and it feels real. Too real." She moved closer, placing a hand lightly on the counter. "That is the way of the mirror crystals. They do not lie, Jed. They show not only what was, but what could be. The more you allow yourself to see, the more complicated it becomes, and the more you must choose carefully what to focus on." Jed ran a hand over his face, feeling a strange mix of excitement and fear. "Choose? I thought the mirror just showed me things." "It shows you things," Celine said, her voice calm. "But the mind is not a passive vessel. You must decide how to act on what you see. Otherwise, the reflections can overwhelm you. They can confuse, distract, even tempt you. That is why you must be mindful." "Tempt me? How?" Celine gestured toward the small glowing cup on the counter. "The cup itself is not dangerous. The temptation is in the vision it provides. You might see a life you desire so strongly that you forget the life you have now, or you might see regrets that make you doubt yourself. That is why the test is not in drinking, but in deciding how to respond." Jed swallowed, feeling a lump in his throat. He thought of his herd, the wide plains, and the lonely nights spent under alien stars. He had always been a man of action, of responsibility, of doing what had to be done. Yet the mirror crystals were showing him a world where he could have chosen differently, acted differently, lived differently, and part of him ached for it. Selena's voice broke into his thoughts. You do not have to face it all at once, but you must decide if you are ready to look deeper. Jed hesitated. The desert stretched endlessly outside the outpost, and he felt the pull of those endless possibilities. He could ride away, return to the plains, and ignore the mirror. Or he could stay, drink again, and let the echoes of other lives guide him toward something unknown. Finally, he stepped forward and picked up the cup. The glow was brighter than before, as if urging him to see, to act, to accept. He held it in his hands, feeling the warmth against his palms. The hum of the outpost faded around him, leaving only the cup, the mirror, and the pull of the possibilities it contained. Jed drank. The liquid flowed over his tongue with a sweetness that carried memories and emotions. This time the visions came faster, sharper, more vivid. He saw himself as a traveler, exploring distant moons, helping strangers, forming bonds he had never imagined. He saw himself leading the herd through storms, making choices that would keep them safe, and yet he also saw moments of regret, missed chances, and loneliness he had not expected. The mirror shimmered, and Jed's reflection began to change again. He was no longer simply himself, but a combination of all the possibilities, all the choices, all the lives he could have lived. He felt dizzy, not from the liquid, but from the weight of it all. Selene stepped closer. Remember, she said softly, this is not a test of courage. It is a test of choice. You do not have to follow the visions blindly. You choose what to carry with you. You choose which reflections matter. Jed closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. The echoes of his alternate lives were loud in his mind, each calling for his attention. The traveler, the leader, the friend, the lover, each voice intertwined with the others, forming a chorus of possibilities. He felt overwhelmed, yet strangely calm. For the first time he understood that he could not be all these versions of himself at once. He had to decide which part of him he wanted to guide his actions, which reflections he would let shape his choices. He opened his eyes and looked into the mirror. The reflections shimmered, each one alive with color and motion. He reached out, not touching the glass, but as if touching the possibilities themselves. I choose, he whispered. Selene nodded, a gentle smile on her lips. Good. That is the first true step. The mirror crystals will continue to show you, but you now have the strength to act with purpose. You will not be lost in the echoes, because you have chosen your path. Jed set the cup down and stepped back. He felt lighter, as if a weight he had carried for decades had been lifted. The visions were still there, flickering at the edges of his mind, but they no longer threatened to overwhelm him. Instead, they were tools, guides, and reminders of the man he could be. He looked outside, at the plains stretching endlessly under the twin suns. His herd was grazing calmly, unaware of the internal journey their rancher had just experienced. Jed smiled, a sense of clarity washing over him. He understood now that life was not about avoiding mistakes or regretting choices. It was about understanding, learning, and deciding which reflections to carry forward. Selene watched him quietly, knowing that he had taken the first step toward a deeper understanding of himself. The cup glowed faintly on the counter, a reminder that the journey was not over. There would be more visions, more reflections, more choices, but Jed was ready. He mounted his horse again, guiding the herd toward the grazing fields. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of dust and ionized minerals across the plains. Jed felt the stirrings of anticipation in his chest, a new energy that came not from the desert or the herd, but from within himself. The day stretched on, filled with simple tasks, checking fences, guiding the herd, monitoring the water supply. Yet even in these mundane moments, Jed carried the lessons of the mirror crystals with him. Each reflection he had seen, each echo of another life had left a mark. He understood that the choices he made now, even the small ones, mattered. By evening, the suns dipped low again, painting the sky with shades of orange and violet. Jed returned to the outpost, his mind calm, yet alive with the possibilities of tomorrow. Selene met him at the doorway. "You have done well," she said softly. "The mirror has tested you, and you have chosen wisely." "I see that now. It's not about seeing everything. It's about understanding what matters. I won't get lost in the reflections anymore." Selene smiled, a faint glow of pride in her eyes. "Good. The journey continues, but you have taken the first step. Remember this, the choices you make are yours alone. The reflections are guides, not masters. And sometimes the simplest path is the truest. Jed looked toward the horizon, where the twin moons began to rise. He felt a sense of peace he had not known in years. The echoes of other lives were still there, faint and whispering, but they no longer confused or overwhelmed him. Instead, they reminded him of the depth of life, of the richness of choice, and of the strength within himself. As night settled over Cinder Mesa, Jed Calloway, rancher of the plains, felt ready to face whatever reflections and possibilities the desert or the mirror crystals would offer next. He had passed the first test, and tomorrow he would take another step. The twin moons of Cinder Mesa had risen fully into the violet sky, casting a soft silver light over the plains. Jed Calloway rode slowly toward the starling outpost, his herd trailing behind him, their polished hides reflecting the moon's glow. The day had been long and quiet, spent guiding the herd through the grazing fields and checking the water supplies, but Jed's mind had been alive with the echoes of his reflections. He had spent the last 2 days exploring the visions the mirror crystals had shown him. He had seen lives where he had chosen differently, moments where he had acted with more courage or gentleness, and paths he had never dared to walk, and yet, through it all, he had come to understand a truth he had not known before. It was not the visions themselves that mattered, but the choices he made after seeing them. As he approached the outpost, Celine was waiting at the doorway, her calm eyes watching him. The soft glow of her plants filled the small courtyard, and the air carried a gentle warmth, as if the place itself was alive. "You have returned," she said quietly, a faint smile on her lips. "I trust the reflections have been enlightening?" Jed dismounted slowly, brushing dust from his clothes. He looked at her, feeling the weight of the journey he had been through. "They have," he admitted. "I've seen lives I never lived, choices I never made, and regrets I didn't know I carried. But I think I understand now. The reflections aren't about changing who I am. They're about seeing who I can be." Celine nodded. "Exactly. The mirror crystals do not force anyone to change. They only reveal. And the true strength lies in knowing what to carry forward." Jed's gaze drifted toward the counter where the small cup still glowed faintly. He felt a sense of gratitude and awe for the gift it had given him. Not magic, not tricks, just a mirror that reflected the deepest parts of himself. He realized that, for the first time in years, he truly knew himself. Not just the surface, but the echoes, the possibilities, and the choices that defined him.
"Will you drink again?"
Selena asked softly, sensing his thoughts. Jed shook his head. "No, I don't need to. I understand enough now. The visions will stay with me, but I don't need the cup to guide me anymore. I can choose my path without it." Celine's smile deepened. "Then you are ready." For a long moment they stood in silence, the outpost quiet except for the soft hum of the hover drones and the distant calls of the herd. Jed felt a strange mixture of calm and anticipation, as if the world itself was holding its breath. "I have to leave soon," Jed said finally, his voice low but steady. "The plains won't tend themselves, and my herd, they need me." Celine nodded. "Of course. The journey of the rancher is never truly over, but you leave here with more than supplies and tools. You leave with understanding. That is far rarer than any material wealth." Jed smiled, a dry, gentle curve of his lips. "I'll remember that." He mounted his horse, glancing back one last time at the outpost. Celine stood at the doorway, her eyes reflecting the twin moons. The cup on the counter glowed faintly, a reminder of the path he had walked. But Jed did not feel the pull to look again. He had already seen enough to guide him. The herd moved behind him, their soft breathing filling the quiet night. Jed guided them across the plains, feeling the cool desert wind against his face. The twin moons shimmered on the rocky ground, casting silver shadows that danced like memories. As he rode, Jed thought of the lives he had glimpsed, the versions of himself that had chosen differently, acted differently, or dared to dream more boldly. Each reflection had left a mark, a whisper of possibility, but he understood now that he did not need to live all of them. He only needed to carry the lessons, the understanding, and the awareness of what mattered most. He stopped for a moment on a high ridge, looking down at the vast expanse of Cinder Mesa. The plains stretched endlessly, shimmering under the moonlight. The herd moved calmly below, and Jed felt a deep sense of connection, not only to the land, but to himself. For years he had been a man of duty and routine, following the rhythms of the plains and the needs of his cattle. But the mirror crystals had shown him another layer of life, a deeper understanding of choices, possibilities, and the self. He realized that life was not just about survival, but about awareness, reflection, and deliberate action. Jed's thoughts turned again to Celine. She had not forced him, guided him, or lectured him. She had only offered a tool, a mirror, and the space to see. And through it, he had discovered something powerful. The strength to choose, the clarity to act, and the understanding to accept both the life he had lived and the life he could still shape. The nights on Cinder Mesa were long, and the twin moons hung low in the sky as Jed guided his herd back to the main grazing grounds. He felt a sense of peace he had never known, a quiet confidence that came not from certainty, but from understanding. When he returned to his small encampment, he dismounted and looked at the herd settling for the night. He ran a hand over the back of one of the cattle, feeling its warmth and the gentle pulse of life. The reflections, the echoes, and the visions from the cup had not made him forget his responsibilities. Instead, they had deepened his connection to everything he held dear, the land, the herd, and most importantly, himself. He sat on a rock near the water trough, watching the moonlight shimmer on the surface. The stars sparkled above, distant and silent, yet full of possibilities. Jed realized that he did not need to chase every vision or explore every reflection. He only needed to carry the understanding forward, to act with awareness, and to embrace the choices that made him who he was. The desert wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of dust and minerals. Jed took a deep breath, feeling the life around him, the quiet strength of the plains, the calm of the night, and the gentle presence of his herd. He smiled softly, a quiet, contented smile that reached his eyes. Celine's lessons echoed in his mind. The mirror crystals were not masters, but guides. The choices were his, and the reflections were tools to understand himself better. He had learned to see clearly, to accept, and to act with purpose. As the night deepened, Jed mounted his horse one final time, guiding the herd across the plains under the twin moons. The wind carried a gentle chill, brushing across his face and lifting the corners of his hat. He felt alive, aware, and free, not because the visions had given him answers, but because they had shown him the questions worth asking. The plains stretched endlessly before him, silvered by moonlight, and Jed felt the quiet thrill of possibility. He knew the mirror crystals would remain in Starling, glowing softly, waiting for the next traveler. But for him, their work was done. He had seen, reflected, and chosen, and now he would live with the understanding he had gained. The herd moved steadily, each step a reminder of the rhythm of life, the beauty of simplicity, and the strength of responsibility. Jed rode at the head, not lost in reflections or visions, but grounded in the present, aware of the choices he could make, and confident in the man he had become. He glanced once more at the horizon, where the twin moons hung like silent sentinels, and whispered softly to himself, "I know who I am, and I know who I can be." The plain stretched endlessly, mysterious yet welcoming. Jed Calloway, rancher of Cinder Mesa, rode on, carrying the lessons of the mirror crystals, the echoes of possibility, and the quiet certainty that life, like the desert, was vast, full of wonder and waiting for him to explore. The stars sparkled above, the twin moons cast silver paths across the rocky ground, and Jed felt, for the first time in a long while, truly whole. And with that, he rode into the night, the echoes of reflection behind him, and the promise of choice ahead.